Hey everybody, Taylor with KC here, and welcome to the next video in the KC Academy. So in this little mini series, we are covering all of the different positions that you might want to mount some lights onto your off-road vehicle. So today in this video, we're going to cover bumper mounted lights. Now, pretty quick, pretty easy. There's some really cool benefits of bumper mounted lights, some of the things that you can play with in terms of beam patterns, but there are, really one main drawback as well. So we're gonna dive into all of that and more into this video right now. So let's start by covering the first quick and easy question, which is, what are bumper mounted lights? It might sound super simple, but let's just cover it anyway. Typically in this position, we're talking about anything that's in line with or below your headlights of your vehicle. So these are lights that can go and they can be mounted on top of your bumper, or they can even get flush mounted within your bumper. 80–90% of the time, we're gonna be talking about a front bumper, things that get mounted in or on that. But roughly 10–20% of the time, we'll also be referring to rear bumpers as well. So we'll get into that a little bit later. Really, all there is to cover on those are reverse lights, whereas on your front bumper, there's a bunch of different options for what you might mount in there. So number one, you can kind of see it right here. We have individual auxiliary lights, pods, bigger 6-inch, 5-inch round lights, things like that, or just your standard 3-inch cubes, or kind of the other category for options for a front bumper mounted light would be an LED light bar. So this can be a dual row light bar or even some of your slimmer single row light bars as well. So those really highly depend on what your vehicle actually is set up to be capable for. So if you have a totally stock vehicle with the stock bumper, your options are going to be a lot more limited to probably something like a fog pocket light, just a plug and play, an easy swap out kit. Whereas if you have an aftermarket, a steel or an aluminum bumper, then typically your options are much more expanded. So with that, that's everything you need to know about the what. Now let's get into the why. Why front bumper mounted lights? What are they good for? And what's gonna give you the most benefit? So one of the huge benefits for mounting lights into this position on your front bumper is the fact that, number one, they're really, really good for environments where it's super dusty, rainy, snowy, foggy, things like that. These are mounted in a little bit better position to be kind of undercutting or cut through a lot of those high particle environments. So combine that with the fact that a lot of our lights, like our Pro 6 lights right here, you can snap an amber shield on that. That kind of reduces that wavelength a little bit, makes it even better for cutting through the dust and the snow and the fog. That is one of the huge benefits of front bumper lights. Now, hand in hand with that is, compared to a ditch light or an overhead light, you don't get as much hood glare because they're mounted below the hood. So you don't have a lot of that blinding light that's gonna come back into your eyes when you have lights that are mounted a little bit lower. Now, by the way, real quick, if you haven't yet checked out our video on ditch lights or on the overhead light, just click up here to the playlist and we'll link you right to those. You can go ahead and check those out right after. That way you can really see which light is gonna be perfect for your needs. So that's one of the huge, huge, huge benefits of a front bumper mounted light. But the second is that you also have a huge range of flexibility when it comes to the beam patterns. Now, because they are mounted in line or below your headlights, that opens you up to be able to utilize an SAE, a street legal driving beam or fog beam pattern. So now you can improve the performance of your vehicle, not only when you're off-road, but also when you're on-road. So you can get a set of Pro 6 lights in that driving beam pattern. Now it can do it all. It's gonna give you great visibility on-road. You use them as if they were your high beam. So you still wanna cut them off when you have oncoming traffic. But when you don't have oncoming traffic, turn them up, light up the road in front of you and see what's ahead. Now that same thing applies when you're off-road as well. So those are some of the really big benefits of a front bumper mounted light. The other thing that I actually really like is that you can kind of aim them wherever you want as well, especially if you stick with something that's a pod style. So these you can kind of aim out, you can aim them a little bit more in, they can complement the rest of your vehicle package, the rest of the lighting on your vehicle a little bit more so than something else. Because of that, now That isn't to say a light bar isn't good, it just doesn't have as much flexibility as a pod light. So it's really cool because you have a lot of different options when it comes to mounting lights in this position. So with that, that's pretty much everything. Let's get into right now what the different options for beam patterns entirely are beyond a driving beam pattern, so that way you can know which you need to pick for your front bumper light. So there's obviously a bunch of different beam patterns for off-road use lights. So let's dive into what a front bumper mounted light is actually going to be best for. Now, some people really do like to put spot beam lights here to get that longest range distance, and that is a really good option if you don't have any other long distance lights on your vehicle. So if you have an overhead mounted light bar, you probably don't want to put spot beam lights on your front bumper. You have two zones of lights that are doing the exact same function, so you don't really need that. So if you don't have that, spot beams work great. Personal preference is not what I would do. I would do something that has a little bit more spread to it. So it's gonna cover that short to mid-range zone a little bit better rather than being so intentional on that long distance zone. So what those fall into, you're looking at a driving beam, as I mentioned earlier, which again is awesome because you get the best of both worlds for on-road and off-road use. But if you want something that has a little bit of a taller beam as well, you could look for something that is either a combo beam, that's like our Flexera 4s. They have spots on the top and they have spreads on the bottom, so it is inherently a combo beam. A lot of the 20 or 30 inch light bars that are gonna be flush mounted into bumpers on a Toyota Tacoma or Jeeps, things like that, those are also gonna be combo beam patterns. So combo is a really good option. Spread might be something else that you hear commonly referred to. This is just something that's gonna spread the light out over a wider horizontal area rather than reaching out super far for that long vertical distance lighting itself. So as we kind of get even wider, the next option, of course, for bumper lights would be fog lights. So this can either be an LED replacement fog light, so that's still true SAE fog beam that has a real specific beam pattern meant for that, but is just a step up in terms of brightness and width and coverage compared to your factory fog beams. Or it could also just be a light that goes into the fog pocket itself that is not street legal, so you can only use it off-road, but it pulls out those factory fog lights itself. So those are some of your few beam pattern options: spot, combo, spread, and fog beam. One other beam that's really good for bumper lights is actually really good only for reverse lights. So this is mounted in your rear bumper. When you're talking about reverse lights, you're talking about real slow. You're talking about something that's lighting up a big, wide area. So here you're gonna be looking for something either along the lines of what's gonna be called a diffuse beam light or a flood beam light. Really, all that means is it's projecting light out in a big, wide pattern rather than really have anything of distance at all. So that's all the beam patterns that you want for your front or your rear mounted bumper lights. Now, with that being said, let's dive right into how to aim them. And particularly, we're gonna focus on forward-facing or front bumper lights. Okay, diving right in on how to aim your lights, it's gonna be broken up into two categories. One is if you have a pod style light like this that kind of has a little bit more adjustability side to side versus only up and down. Or category number two is gonna be more of a light bar style or something that's flush mounted into a bumper. Like on my truck, I have a bumper that has fog pockets, but I use off-road lights in there. My adjustability is quite limited in there, so I'm not gonna really cover those. So let's first talk about pod style lights. When you go to aim these, you're gonna wanna have on anything else that you may typically have on while driving. So if you're gonna be off-roading with your headlights, then you want to turn your headlights on. Now, pretty standard par for the course, you're gonna wanna be on a dirt road, somewhere that's fairly flat if the road surface isn't too undulating with big hills, things like that. Whoops, washboards, that's probably okay, but nothing too major. You don't want big curves or anything like that in the road. So go out at night, go out, park dead center of the road, turn your lights on, whatever you wanna have. And then what I typically like to do is I would take my lights out just like this and mount them wherever they're mounted. Let's say they're close like this. I will aim them intentionally way too wide. So I'm gonna point them so they're sticking way out to the sides of the vehicle, out to the sides of the trails, lighting up God knows where you don't really need the light. Then what I like to do is slowly adjust them together so that they're kind of aimed in parallel, that they just begin to overlap. And as you see those beams start to come back to one another, you'll kind of notice that the wedge of light itself begins to meld in with one another. So as soon as those beams start to merge, you're looking for roughly in that 25 to 30% overlap zone. That's exactly where you want to mount those lights. Because of the way that you're aiming that, now you're sure that you're getting the maximum width out of it, as well as the true distance that they're meant to achieve at the same time. So that's category one. If you got some pods like this, something auxiliary lights, that's all you got to do for that. It's quick, it's easy, just get out there and do it when it's dark. Same thing can be said for mounting an LED light bar into your front bumper, but this is going to be more up and down rotation. So once again, turn your headlights completely on, get it however you're going to be driving out there normal, same conditions as these, and you're really just going to want to aim this intentionally either too low or too high. For a lower mounted light bar like this, I typically err on the too low side, so I'll point it right down at the ground in front of me, and then you just kind of rotate it up slightly until it gives you that real nice blend of long distance lighting as well as short to mid-range lighting. So the only thing there that's an extra consideration beyond that is if you're driving something like a side-by-side, a UTV that's pretty sport or performance oriented, that's really capable and a little bit on the speedier side. So something like the newer X3s or the Polaris Pro R, those things have a lot of power to them, and the rear of that vehicle tends to set in and the front of that vehicle tends to lift up as you really get on that throttle. So it depends on your driving condition, but you might actually notice when you go out to the dunes and if you use this same aiming technique, that actually when you get on that throttle, your lights are pointed too high. So what you'll want to then do is adjust them slowly downwards, downwards, downwards until it's tuned in for your exact style of driving. So that's everything about how you need to know, or what you need to know about how to aim your front bumper mounted lights. So with that, let's get into the big drawbacks of these lights. And really, spoiler alert, there's only one of them. As I mentioned, there's only one big drawback for bumper mounted lights, whether it's the front bumper or the rear bumper. Simply, you gotta have a place to mount them. So if you have a stock factory bumper, your options are super limited. So sometimes people will go for things like a behind the grill mount, but then you're limited to the depth that you have to work with there. So you have to have a really shallow light. Something like our Simlight LED or even our Apollo Pros are pretty slender. So again, you're limited based on what you have available to you in terms of mounting locations. Now, if you've got an aftermarket steel or aluminum bumper, or heck, even if you have one of the newer Broncos with a nice beefy steel bumper on it, or a Rubicon, something like that, then your options are a little bit more plentiful. So you can either use tube clamps if you have a bull bar, that's a really common mounting location like that, or in the rear bumper, if you don't have cutouts and if you don't have anything underneath where you can mount lights for reverse lights, you're kind of hosed. So you can get creative if you know how to do a little bit of mechanical work, if you know how to make things work, or if you know how to use some stock sheet steel to just make your own fabbed up brackets, or you got to get really creative in terms of what other brackets you can find. But for bumper mounted lights, that's really the biggest drawback, is actually having a location to mount them. And with that, that's everything that you need to know about bumper mounted LED lights. So we did our best to explain exactly all the scenarios of what they're good for, what the big limitation of them is, even the beam patterns that's going to be really good for you. So if you found this video useful and you want to see more like this in the future, please consider subscribing to our channel. It really helps us out a lot. We put a lot of effort into these things and we love making them. We get a ton of these questions on a daily basis here at KC. A lot of people are afraid to ask these questions at scale. You know, you'll go look on the forums and people get roasted for asking certain questions. So heck, we like to take them because we hear them on the phone lines and emails all day long. So we like to just take them and answer them the best that we can. So if you found it, please give us a subscription and let us know in the comment section below what other videos you want to see from us, whether it's about where else you can mount lights, or what beam patterns are good for this or for that, or what's best for your side-by-side or your Jeep or whatever it may be. Just let us know. We love hearing about it. So with that, thank you all so much for tuning in. We really appreciate it. And remember to adventure further.